I just looked at the calendar and it is the 15th of May, which I've just realised is the anniversary of my baptism. Some 23 years ago, I got baptised, and I had just had a bit of a go at my husband, who's going to be away for our wedding anniversary, which is in about a week's time. And it dawned on me that today is almost like a kind of wedding anniversary between me and Jesus. And I hadn't marked it on the calendar or done anything to celebrate it, really. So I decided to make a art journal page. This is part of my 10 Minutes of Trusting series. So I'm going to try and do this in just 10 to 15 minutes. As a celebration of my baptism and that covenant commitment between me and Jesus. If we haven't met before, my name is Jenna and I like to use mixed media art journaling like this as a form of prayer and worship and meditation. If that sounds good to you, then hit the subscribe button and we'll keep in touch. I'm working on a page here in my small A5 journal that already has a background on it. This is just some watercolour play and some doodles with a yellow Posca pen, I think. But it's always good to have some backgrounds ready to go in your journal. And then you can just, if you feel inspiration strike, you can just get on and start making. This blue tissue paper that I'm putting on here represents the waters of baptism, and I'm not interested in getting it on nice and smoothly. I want all that texture and wrinkles, so I'm actually doing my best to keep as much of that as possible. So on top of the tissue paper, I am going to do some journaling, and what I am journaling about is an imaginative exercise, thinking about what my life would be like, who I would be had I not committed my life to Jesus. How might it look different if I'd gone down a different path? And we can never really know that. But I can imagine that I might have got into more trouble in life, that thinking about my university years. I'm thinking that I wouldn't have received healing on a number of fronts and what that would have meant for my life. It would have meant that I didn't have any children, for example. And the last thing that I write is all alone. And I wrote she is alone because the one thing that I am sure of as a Christian is that I am never alone. And this was a really helpful exercise for me because I've been spending quite a lot of time recently thinking about who I want to be in the future and how that might be different to who I am and what I'm doing now, and some of the frustrations around that. But it's really good to do this exercise as really a sort of reality check about all the blessings that I do have, I have had and I do have in my life, and be grateful for that, for where I am now. For the next stage, I'm using some white paint and a brayer, this roller tool, to cover over those things that all those bad things that might have happened had I not chosen to follow Jesus. And really this is a metaphor for what happens in baptism, isn't it? Because the idea of going into the water is that we are washed clean. All our sin is washed away. And that happens the moment that we decide to commit our lives to Jesus. And baptism is this very beautiful, symbolic sacrament where we make that statement in public in an accountable way. I think it's so important. If you've never been baptised in any way at all, then please do think about getting baptized, have a look in the Bible about what it says about baptism, what Jesus said about baptism, because I believe it's really important, in the same way as I believe that a marriage ceremony is really important. It's not enough just to say I love you to each other. There's spiritual significance in what we do, these physical acts that we do. So as well as this idea of being washed clean in the waters of baptism because of what Jesus did on the cross, he took all our sin and shame and guilt and pain and nailed it to that cross and took it away, so we don't have to wear it anymore. And so baptism cleanses us, but also it is symbolic of death, how it's like a kind of grave. As we go down into baptism, we die. Our old self, our spiritual self dies, and as we come up out of the water, we are raised with Christ. That's quite a dramatic thing, really. And I'm making this line, this sort of horizon line in my picture, really nice and dark, to give that sense of finality. So I was trying to think how to represent the new me coming up out of the waters of baptism, and I decided to use a dragonfly. So I've got a fine liner pen here and I am sketching. I've got a reference photo in front of me and I'm doing my best to do a quick sketch of a dragonfly on a separate piece of paper. It's just copy paper, while my watery background is drying. And I think the reason I was drawn to the idea of a dragonfly was a story that I was told in a school assembly when I was in primary school, and I remembered it all my life, and you may well have heard it or got the picture book at home, but it describes these dragonfly nymphs living in a pond, and every so often one of these dragonfly nymphs leaves and goes up, crawls up a stem, and they're never to be seen again. And everyone in the pond is very sort of mystified and anxious about this. But this one little dragonfly says, don't worry, I'll promise I'll come back and tell you what it's like up there. And of course, when it's this little dragonfly's turn to change, it climbs up the stem and turns into a beautiful dragonfly, but is unable to, as much as it tries, is unable to make it back into the pond water to tell the little dragonfly nymphs what actually happens. And this is used as a metaphor to talk about grief, I guess, when people have lost loved ones who've died, but also to talk about heaven. Like heaven, just because people can't communicate to us from heaven doesn't mean that heaven doesn't exist. And of course, the one person who did come back to life is Jesus. And because of that, Jesus is qualified to talk to us about eternal life, about heaven and God, and we should listen to what he has to say about it. So as you can see, I've used my watercolours to add some colour to this dragonfly, and now I'm cutting it out to stick it to the page, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. And what I felt God was saying to me as I did this is that everything that he has called me to be, that he has wanted me to be, was deposited in me at that moment where I committed to him. It wasn't like he just gave me a bit and then he gave me a bit more and he's holding something back. He's not holding anything back. Everything that I need and everything that I am has already been given to me in full, and it's really a journey of discovering that, of putting on a lens of heaven and seeing all that treasure that he has already deposited in me, which was just a beautiful revelation, really. I've added the word alive using some colourful stickers, and I've also written in because he lives, which is what Jesus said in John 14 verse 19. Just adding a few splatters and some sparkles here, and I think we'll call this done. So what about you? Why don't you leave me a comment telling me maybe what your life might have been like without Jesus and some of the good things he has done for you. So leave me a comment, do hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you soon. God bless.